When they read my name at the hospital reception desk, the air around me felt heavy, as if someone had closed all the windows in the world at once. The nurse, who until then had been typing in a hurry, stopped her fingers on the keyboard and looked at me like someone looking at a ghost. She blinked twice, tilted her head and said in a low voice that she would need to call the supervisor. I stood there, with my bag hanging on my shoulder and the strong smell of alcohol invading my nostrils, trying to understand why a simple name caused such discomfort. Minutes later, 2 women came back to the counter with me, and one of them, unable to hold their gaze, said words that I will never forget. According to the system, I no longer existed. My registration showed that I died 12 years ago. The date was there, marked in red. The cause, poorly filled out. The signature, unrecognizable. My heart raced in a painful, almost violent way, as if it wanted to break inside my chest. I looked around for someone to confirm that this was a mistake, a mix-up, anything that wasn't true, but people just looked away. Suddenly, I became invisible and exposed at the same time. Invisible because officially I was dead. Exposed because there, in the cold light of the hospital, someone had just buried me for the second time. I felt my legs lose strength. I held the counter with both hands, and the cold marble went through my skin. My voice was shaky when I asked how this was possible, if I was there, breathing, talking, feeling. The answer came like a sentence without a judge. For the system, I shouldn't be alive. I left the hospital without being treated, without answers, carrying a feeling that bordered on absolute despair. The streets seemed different, distant, as if I were walking in a city where no one could recognize me. The noise of cars, people talking, doors slamming, everything sounded distant, muffled, as if it were underwater. And inside me an emptiness grew so immense that, for a frightening second, I thought if truly disappearing wouldn't just be fulfilling what the papers had already decided for me. My name is Helena. I'm 63 years old. I've lived my entire life trying to be discreet, almost invisible, working in silence, without disturbing, without attracting attention. For many years, I was a caregiver for the elderly and a night shift cleaner. I learned to walk with my head down, talk little, and observe a lot. I always thought this was the way to survive in a world that was never kind to me. I lived in a small, old apartment, in a simple neighborhood, and my routine was predictable. Waking up early, making thin coffee, listening to the radio on low, and going out for another day of work. People saw me as a quiet lady, maybe even forgettable. No one imagined that I carried a past too heavy to say out loud. When I got home that day, I closed the door and leaned my back against the wood. Silence swallowed me. My breathing was short, uneven. I walked slowly to the kitchen table and saw, on it, the only object that I kept as a secret. An old hospital bracelet, yellowed with age, with my handwritten name and a date from many years ago. I never had the courage to throw it away. At that moment, she seemed to stare at me. Everything started to make disturbing sense. That wasn't a mistake. Someone, at some point, had decided that I needed to die on paper so that others could remain alive and safe, and I accepted it silently, even without fully understanding the consequences. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories began to appear like shadows on the bedroom walls. Faces I had tried to forget, places I swore I would never set foot in again, broken promises, choices that hurt people I loved. 12 years. 12 years officially dead. 12 years of living like I'm apologizing for breathing. And now the past had come back to take its toll. If you're listening to this story now, I need you to pay attention to every detail, because nothing here is by chance. Every word, every silence, every piece of this puzzle will show that the truth always finds a way to surface, even if it takes decades. And before continuing, I make a simple request. Subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel, leave your like, and activate the bell, because here you will follow real stories of lives that were broken, silenced, and then rebuilt with courage. Stories that prove that it's never too late to regain your dignity, even when the whole world says you're done. At that moment, with the bracelet clutched in my hands and the tears flowing silently, I understood that my life was about to change again. Only now, for the first time, I wasn't going to run away. I would find out who had killed me on paper, why, and what exactly they were trying to hide it all these years. And whoever had done this needed to know one thing very clearly. I was still here, alive, and ready to remind the whole world that I exist. When dawn came, The sky was gray, as if it knew the day would bring no relief. I still held the hospital bracelet in my hand, now wet with sweat and marked by the pressure of my fingers during the night. No sleep, no rest. Just memories coming back, one after another, like knives that I myself had buried in the past, but that were now tearing up my present without asking permission. I went to the mirror and looked at myself. The sunken eyes, the tired face, the gray and disheveled hair. I thought, this is what someone who has died once and survived looks like. But in that reflection, I saw more than that. I saw the woman I was, the girl who grew up without anyone, the young woman who chose the wrong path to escape helplessness, the adult who exchanged love for silence. I needed to tell the whole truth, even if it was just once. I was born in a small, forgotten town where poverty and fear shared the same roof. My mother disappeared when I was 6 years old. Nobody looked. My father would drink and disappear for days. When he returned, he brought the smell of cachaça, sweat, and dried blood on his clothes. Sometimes he returned silently. Other times, he screamed and hit until he got tired. I grew up learning that promises couldn't be trusted, that love was a favor, and that survival meant not bothering. I was raised by a distant aunt who was already raising 3 other children and treated me like an additional burden. The food was divided according to measure. The looks were hard, and the words of affection never existed. When I was 14, I ran away for the first time. I lived on the street, learned to steal food and escape from the police. A lady gave me shelter for a few months in exchange for cleanliness and silence. There I met an older man who promised me a different life. He took me away with sweet words, and for a while I believed. I believed it was possible for someone to like me without wanting me to be submissive, without hitting me, without erasing me. But I soon understood that it was just another cycle of domination. He used me to apply small blows. I went to banks, pretended to be someone else, and withdrew low amounts with false documents. At first, I felt sick. I was shaking. I was afraid of being arrested. Afterwards, I got tougher. Crime became a silent craft, discreet, almost clean. It was like being nobody, and no one doesn't suffer. At 22, I had my first child. His father disappeared the next day. I never asked why. I just continued. I did everything to protect him from what I was. He worked during the day in a laundry, and at night he transported small amounts of money and documents. An envelope here, a bag there, nunca vi arma. I never heard a scream. It was all silent, hidden, calculated. But the weight grew. Each night, guilt gripped me. I remember one time when my son asked me why I didn't arrive until late. I replied that I took care of sick people. And he, with his big, confident eyes, said I was a hero. That destroyed me inside. Over time, the services became heavier. I was asked to take care of missing persons documents. I knew what it was. I knew that if I accepted, someone would officially disappear from the world, even if they were alive. It was dirty, big, easy money. But I accepted. We owed 3 months' rent, my son was sick, and I only had 83 reais in my account. That night, I received 4,700 in cash, inside a plastic bag. I bought medicine, paid the rent, bought food, but I sank into silence. At 30, a tragedy marked me forever. My sister, who barely spoke to me, appeared asking for help. I was running away from someone. I agreed to hide her for 3 days. That week, she disappeared. He never came back. The police knocked on my door. They said she was involved with dangerous people. I never said anything. I remained silent. I kept her phone, a strange key, and a note that simply said, "Trust no one." I kept everything in a shoebox and buried it in the backyard of a house where I lived for a short time. Over the years, I moved cities. I used documents that cleaned my past. I became another person. The real me was left behind, as if it had never existed. My son grew up and moved away. He said I was cold, that I hid too much, that I was never a real mother. And he was right. I protected him so much from who I was that he never knew who I was. One day he left, with a backpack on his back, and the phrase that still cuts me to this day: "You don't love anyone, not even yourself." After that, I spent years without contact with anyone in my family. I lived alone, changed addresses every 2 years, worked simple jobs, avoided appearing in photos, on social media, anywhere where someone could recognize me. I did everything to erase my tracks, because I knew that one day the past would demand everything I owed, and he came. Not with screams, not with chasing. It came with silence and system. with a computer screen telling me I shouldn't be alive. If you're listening to this and have had days where you felt like you needed to disappear to survive, leave your comment right now with the word invisible. Because this story is for those who know the weight of carrying a hidden life, for those who know that sometimes survival requires decisions that even distance us from ourselves. Today I understand that every sacrifice I made left marks. The food I stole, the identity I faked, the lies I told my son, the mother I wasn't, the nights I slept in fear, the love that I didn't know how to give, the value I accepted to disappear from other people's lives. All of this brought me here. And now, more than ever, I know that I can't keep running away. Because no matter how much you try to erase your past, it continues to breathe behind you, waiting for the right time to return. And mine just came back, and I need to face it, from the front, alone or not, but live. The next morning, when trying to withdraw a small amount at the bank branch where I had kept my account for almost 6 years, the employee asked me to wait. He said the system was blocked. Something common, perhaps, if I hadn't been to the hospital the day before. I waited in silence for more than 20 minutes, sitting in a cold chair, staring at the floor. When I was called back, she was already accompanied by a manager. He wore a dark gray jacket, straight hair, the look of someone who judges before listening. He said that my account had been frozen due to document inconsistencies. I asked what that meant. He responded with a tone of voice so politely cutting that it hurt more than a slap. He said that, officially, I was considered deceased. The financial institution had received an automatic notification from the IRS, and that, until this was regularized, I would not be able to move any more cents. The manager even took care to give me a free legal assistance pamphlet, as if he was doing me a favor. On the street, people hurried past, ignoring the 63-year-old woman standing on the sidewalk, holding a piece of paper that basically said she was nobody. I tried calling an old public service number, but the attendant said there was no record in the CPF that I provided. None. As if I had never been born. The sensation was of being extinguished in real time, little by little, like a candle being suffocated by one's own hands. And the more I tried to react, the more the doors closed. At the pharmacy, the card didn't go through. In transportation, my e-pass was refused. A world of numbers and systems, all saying the same thing. You shouldn't be here. I walked home, my legs aching and my mind spinning. And then, as if everything was orchestrated, I received a letter with no return address left under the door. It was a simple brown envelope with my old name written in hand. That name I left behind when I disappeared. Inside there was just a sheet with a sentence written in bold letters. Stop poking around. They already gave you a chance. Don't test your luck. The paper shook in my hands. I knew those lyrics. The way of drawing the letters, the aggressive way of closing the words. It belonged to someone I hadn't seen in at least 20 years. Someone who had many reasons to want me dead, and even more so to keep my death certificate intact. I was silent for hours, going through old papers. I looked through my things and found a photograph. It was from 1998. In it, I was sitting next to a man in a dark suit with a restrained smile. Behind us, a wall full of graduation pictures. At that time, I was part of a scheme with him. Forgery of academic documents. We charged high prices from influential people to create fake CVs. I delivered the papers. He took care of the systems. A man who entered politics years later. And that, according to rumors, eliminated anyone who could pose a threat, including ex-partners, including me. The following night, I heard loud knocking on my apartment door. It wasn't common. Nobody visited me. I looked through the peephole and didn't see anyone. But there was an object on the floor, a small wooden box, locked with a red ribbon. I picked it up carefully and took it inside. When I opened it, I found a rusty key, similar to those from an old cabinet, and a note. Rua do Ferreiro, number 319, last door, 10 o'clock. Just that. No name, no explanation. Was it a trap, a warning, a clue? My heart was pounding in my chest, but my mind was already made up. I couldn't run anymore, not after being buried alive. I took the hospital bracelet that was kept, I took it, and put it in my pocket. For the first time, I decided to go towards the past. If you've been listening to me this far, write the keyword missing in the comments. Just like that. This word represents everything that happened to me. It represents the years in which I ceased to exist, not just on paper, but in life. and share this video with someone who has had their identity ripped apart by pain or silence. Maybe this story will help someone get up from the dark place where they hid for too long. The next morning, I went to the indicated address. The street was old, with crooked cobblestones and a damp smell. The houses had low walls, rusty railings and windows covered with faded cloth. At 10 o'clock sharp, I entered through the last door. It was an abandoned warehouse, with dust everywhere. At the back, there was an old metal cabinet, locked. The key fit perfectly. Inside, I found a black leather briefcase. Inside it, newspaper clippings, documents, photos of me from different years, and the most frightening thing, a certified copy of the death certificate with my forged signature and the stamp of a notary's office in a city I've never been to. There were also bank statements with huge amounts, transactions made in my name, withdrawal dates, and a photo of a man I hadn't seen since 2003. It was him, the politician, the man in the dark suit, the same one who told me, 20 years ago, that if I spoke a word, there wouldn't even be a hole to hide what was left of me. It was at that moment that I realized that my death was not a mistake. It was a plan, and I had been useful, a discarded identity, a ghost to cover up crimes, a woman with a dirty past, perfect to be sacrificed in silence. That folder was my only chance to turn the tide, but it was also a ticket to hell, because now I knew too much. And those who know too much in this kind of world don't live long. When I left there, I decided I wasn't going to run away. No more. Someone needed to answer for all of this, for my stolen identity, for the life I lost, for the years of silence, because of the guilt they shoved down my throat. But first, I needed to tell this story right, show the truth, prove that I exist, and for that, I will need to go to the end. If you believe that no one should be buried alive, that every person has the right to recover their identity, then comment here from which city or country you are following this story. And remember to subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel, turn on notifications, and get ready, because what comes next isn't just a revelation, it's a war, and I'm ready. I left the warehouse with the leather briefcase glued to my chest, as if that object was all I had left of my identity. My steps were short and calculated. The street seemed narrower than upon arrival, and every sound around seemed charged with menace. The wind dragged dry leaves along the sidewalk, as if whispering ancient secrets. I didn't know exactly where to go, but I knew I couldn't go back home. Not after that. The folder contained too much evidence, too many documents, truths that, if placed in the wrong hands, could silence me for good. But if used well, they could finally turn the key to this story. For the first time in a long time, I had a gun in my hands. Not a firearm, but something more powerful, the truth. I took a bus to the other side of town, my face pressed against the window, trying not to think about who might be following me. I put the folder inside an old backpack and went straight to the only place where there was still a chance of being heard without being judged. The community center where I worked for 3 years as a volunteer, cleaning, organizing food, and teaching literacy classes to older women. Inside, there was a young lawyer, Louisa, who offered free legal advice to residents in vulnerable situations. She was always kind to me, discreet, professional. I trusted her. I showed the documents, explained in a low voice everything I had discovered. With each page she read, her face changed color. When he finished, he looked me in the eye and said that this wasn't just a miscarriage of justice. It was a complex fraud structure involving notary offices, banks, public bodies, and international transactions. He said that, with that evidence, it was possible to open a federal investigation, but that would put me at real risk. I took a deep breath. For the first time, someone saw me as alive. I don't look dead on paper, and that gave me courage. He said he would accept the consequences, but that he would not run away anymore. I asked her to guide me, legally, to deliver what I had safely. In less than 2 days, she took me to an allied prosecutor, an experienced woman, with a steady and silent gaze. He received me in a small room, with the smell of old paper and weak coffee. He listened to me in silence, wrote down everything. He picked up the folder, as if he were holding a body, said that, and I needed to sign a form and record a video statement. He said that if something happened to me, the video would be given to the press. I signed. I recorded it. Each sentence came out as a release. I told everything, name by name, place by place, the dates, the threats, the people involved. And I ended with a sentence that wasn't planned, but came from the depths of my soul. I died on paper, but now I will live as someone who no longer owes anything to anyone. In the following days, changes began to happen. The prosecutor filed the first cases under secrecy. 2 names mentioned by me were placed under investigation: a parliamentary advisor and a retired notary. Movements were frozen. A judge demanded new examinations of the documents. And in the middle of all this, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my son. After more than 10 years without hearing his voice, he said he heard from a third party that I was involved in something serious, that someone had shown a video where I told old truths. He cried. He said he didn't know if he could forgive me, but that he wanted to see me, that I wanted to understand why I did all that. My hand was shaking when holding the cell phone. I replied that I never wanted him to carry the weight of my story, that, if I remained silent, it was to spare him, and he just said he didn't want to run away anymore. We arranged to meet on Saturday, and that gave me more strength than any legal protection. The next day, someone I never imagined would return appeared at the door of the community center. It was Marta, my ex-sister-in-law, sister of my missing sister. She was older, gray hair, deep-set eyes, but still with the same dry voice. He said he knew things I hadn't even imagined, that my sister, before disappearing, had left evidence that all of this, the fraud, the fake certificate, the involvement with politicians, was bigger than anyone supposed. He delivered a letter, yellowed with age, handwritten, in which my sister said that if something happened to her, the truth would one day find its way, and that I, without even knowing it, would be the piece that would untie the knot. The letter was sealed, with my old signature on the back, as if she knew I would need it one day. The prosecutor attached the letter to the file, and that was like a bomb. Cross-confirmations began to emerge. Documents from 1999 were reopened. The name of the politician involved appeared in 5 previous complaints, all of which were archived due to lack of evidence. Now, there were real connections. Lines are drawn between false identities, properties acquired with forged documents, and even suspicious disappearances. The structure began to shake, and I, who for decades was just a name erased, now became the key to a scandal that could drag many powerful people into the light. If you've been following this far, I ask you, like this video, activate the bell, and share it with someone who has felt too invisible for too long. Write the keyword justice in the comments, because sometimes what separates silence from reparation is a single decision to no longer remain silent. My name reappeared in official records. The lawyer managed to reverse the death certificate. Now, in the system, I am alive again. But more than that, for the first time, I felt alive inside. Scared, yes, but whole. With everything that happened, a new name began to circulate in the investigations. A high-ranking public official who signed documents on my behalf in 2007, the year I officially died. He was the missing link between the registry office, the politician, and the network of false documents. And with the evidence in hand, the prosecution began arrest requests. The silence ended. The network began to collapse. And I, a woman who for years lived hidden in the shadows of the past, became the key witness to a truth much greater than I myself imagined. But the hardest part was yet to come. Facing who I loved, ask for forgiveness, accept mistakes, free myself from what held me back, and prepare for the final confrontation. Justice was beginning to move, but I knew that when the truth is exposed, the danger also grows. I had chosen to speak, and now there was no turning back. If this story is touching you, if you believe that every woman has the right to be heard, share it. Because when a woman decides to break the silence, the world will never be the same. I didn't die, and as long as my voice can be heard, no one will bury me in silence anymore. With the process underway, and my name back on the official records, the tension around me began to grow silently but steadily, like a string being pulled millimeter by millimeter. The following days became a sequence of emotional vigilance. I didn't sleep well. My ears listened for any unusual noise. The click of a gate, the sound of a car slowing down too close to my window, a message that took seconds more to carry. Everything seemed like a warning sign. The prosecution was moving forward with investigations, but this meant that the names involved were, little by little, being informed of what was coming to light. And people like that don't wait for justice to knock on the door. They attack first. 2 days before I met my son, I received an anonymous message on my cell phone. It was just an image. On it, my old house, from when he was little, was marked with a red X. That wasn't just a message, it was a threat. The memory of that place, now used as a warning, took my breath away. My first impulse was to cancel the date, to protect him from this. But deep down, I knew that avoiding confrontation wouldn't keep him safe. It was time to face, together, everything that was unresolved between us. On Saturday, he arrived. He was older, unshaven, simple clothes. The eyes, still the same, carried a weight that I recognized immediately. The pain of those who grew up with questions never answered. We sat on a park bench, in a public and open space, as a protective measure. The silence lasted for long minutes, until he asked me with a choked voice if it was all true. I didn't lie. I told everything, without omitting the parts that embarrassed me most. I talked about the money, the documents, the disappearance of my sister, death on paper. He listened without interrupting, but his eyes filled with tears when I mentioned the day I was forced to leave him at school and never return. He asked why, and I, with my heart in pieces, replied that it was either that or drag him with me into an abyss that I myself didn't understand. He took a deep breath, said he needed time, but that he was there. And before leaving, he left the most painful sentence I have ever heard in my entire life, the phrase that marked my breaking moment. He said he didn't know if he could call me mom again, but that he hoped I would, at least now, learn to be human to others and to myself. That night, I felt empty. The kind of emptiness that only silence after the truth can cause. But within that void, a spark. I knew I couldn't change what happened, but he could use the pain as a boost, not to clean up my image, but to prevent other women from being buried in silence like I was. The next day, I was called to a hearing. It wasn't public. A judge had requested an urgent meeting to decide on protective measures for me. I entered the room with my heart racing. The prosecutor, the defense lawyer for one of those involved, and 2 bailiffs were there. During the session, a detail exploded like a grenade. The lawyer presented a document that, according to him, would prove that I had authorized the issuance of the death certificate. It was a yellowed sheet with my forged signature, but the stamp was authentic. The prosecutor reacted quickly, contesting the validity. I looked at it with my stomach in knots. I knew who had done it. The same public servant who was now being investigated. He tried to shift the blame to me. He tried to reverse the narrative. And at that moment, my image began to be questioned. As I left the hearing, a journalist approached me at the door. He asked if I was the woman who had faked her own death to escape jail. He said he received the complaint from an anonymous source. My name again began to circulate, but this time, in the hands of those who wanted to paint me as a fraud. I saw a flood of comments on social media. Some said I was a victim, others that I was a criminal trying to clean up. They called me an opportunistic ghost, from undead scammer. I felt exposed like never before. It was public humiliation hitting hard, but at the same time, each judgment was like a snap that hardened me. I couldn't back down, not after coming this far. It was at this point that I decided to go further. I asked the prosecutor to make the video of my testimony public, let the evidence be released. It would show the folder, the letter from my sister, the ongoing investigation. I wanted to expose everything, not to defend myself, but to protect the truth. She hesitated, but accepted. In less than 24 hours, the article was aired. A special report, with images of the documents, excerpts from my testimony, and interviews with experts confirming that it was a national fraud scheme involving dead identities. The reaction was immediate. On the one hand, support. People on the streets saying they understood me. Other women looking for the prosecutor's office with similar stories. On the other, hate, message threats. One of them said that if I continued, my grandson would suffer the same fate as my sister. That stopped me. I was shaking. I was sweating cold. I almost blacked out. But within the fear, a certainty. They were desperate, and a desperate enemy makes mistakes. The following week, new evidence emerged. A former employee of the registry office decided to collaborate, delivered our internal records, a dossier with forged stamps and payments made in cash. In the middle of it was my name, the date of my death certificate, and a value written next to it, 30,000 rays. That was the price they paid for killing me on paper, to erase my history, to disappear with me. But now, every line in that dossier pushed me closer to the truth. The prosecutor included everything in the process, and the judge scheduled a new hearing, this time public. If you are here, listening to me until now, write the word rupture in the comments, because that's what happened. The breaking point between silence and courage. between fear and reaction. And share this video with someone who needs to know that even after a lifetime of hiding, you can still choose to lift your head and say, "That's enough." The night before the hearing, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my hospital bracelet. She was there all the time, remembering who I was and proving that I survived. Even though I was declared dead, I continued. That even though I was erased, I still existed. And now, with everything about to be revealed, I understood that true justice wasn't just about seeing the guilty punished. It was seeing myself whole in the face of everything. Shameless. No fear, no silence. I didn't know what awaited me in the courtroom, but I knew this would be the time to say everything, out loud, firmly, because the truth, when told by someone who has returned from the dead, has a weight that no one can ignore, and I was ready to carry this weight until the end. On the morning of the public hearing, the sky dawned heavy, as if reflecting the weight of the years I carried on my shoulders. I walked to the courthouse with firm steps, but inside my heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to want to escape my chest. I carried with me the folder with the evidence, the letter from my sister, the copies of the forged death certificate, and, stuck in my coat pocket, the hospital bracelet that accompanied me as a reminder that, despite everything, I survived. Upon arrival, I found dozens of people at the entrance. Television cameras, reporters, onlookers, activists, people of all ages holding posters with phrases saying that silence kills, that identity is dignity, that living is resistance. My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let any fall. I needed to get in there in one piece. The room was packed. In the center, the judge, serene and impenetrable. On the left, representatives of the prosecutor's office. On the right, the defense lawyers for the accused. In the background, a row of benches occupied by people who didn't even know me, but who now followed my story as if it were theirs too. When called, I stood up and walked to the center of the room. I took a deep breath. My knees were shaking, but my voice came out clear, firm. I looked at the judge, then at the audience, and began to speak. I told them who I was, my real name, my age, my profession. I spoke about childhood without affection, youth marked by wrong choices, constant escape, crime, silence, abandonment. I talked about when I disappeared and accepted being erased, the death certificate issued without my knowledge. From the years of living like a shadow, of the documents that brought me back to life, I showed the evidence. I delivered my sister's letter, the folder, the dossier, and when I finished, I left a long pause before saying that I wasn't there to be sanctified. Yes, I was wrong, that I lied, that I hid, but no one, under any circumstances, has the right to kill someone on paper and think that it has no consequences, that no woman deserves to be buried alive just because her past no longer serves the interests of those who once used her. There was silence for a few seconds. The judge asked the lawyers to make their arguments. One of them tried to paint me as an accomplice. He said that I only decided to speak when they saw me cornered, that he was trying to redeem himself to escape the weight of his own guilt. I heard everything in silence. I knew they would try to bend me, but I was no longer that cornered woman. When he finished, the prosecutor stood up, and with a calmness that I had never seen in anyone, he denied it, point by point. He said no one there was judging the past, but the current crimes. Said the system failed me, that they buried me legally to clean up dirty tracks. And now, with evidence and testimony, all of this needed to be corrected. The court needed to decide whether to protect the guilty or return the life of those who had everything stolen. The judge asked for a recess. During the break, I sat in a side room, alone. I looked at my hands, marked by time, for life, for years of working in silence, for hidden tears. I thought about everything I had lost, and in what little I had left. But at that moment, I didn't feel smaller, no less worthy. For the first time, I felt truly alive, as if by telling everything, I had freed myself from an invisible prison that I had carried for years. When the session resumed, the judge announced the preliminary decisions. The three main people involved would have been sentenced to preventive detention. The registry office employee, political advisor, and registration agent were now officially under investigation. Precautionary measures were applied, and justice, even if slowly, began to move. The judge looked at me and said that, although judicial decisions are up to the system, the courage to bring all of this to light had created a precedent, that, in that court, I had regained the right to exist, and in front of everyone, he officially declared me alive and legally rehabilitated. The room applauded. not in a loud way, but with respect, with humanity. I left there with my head held high. The sun, which had previously been hiding, now began to break through the clouds. My son was waiting for me at the door. He hugged me, for the first time in many years. He said he understood now, that what I did didn't erase what he felt, but that, when he saw my struggle, a new type of respect was born within him, and that perhaps, over time, the word mother could have a place among us again. Over the next few months, my life began to rebuild, still with limitations, but with dignity. I rented a small space and opened a project to help women who live without documents. Women who, like me, have been silenced by stories bigger than themselves. I welcome people of all ages. I listen to stories. I give advice. I show paths, teaching that there is no shame in having made a mistake. It's shameful to remain silent when you have the chance to change. Today, I live in a simple house, small, but full of light. I learned to live with little, valuing the silence that doesn't hurt. Hot coffee in the morning, conversation with neighbors, the reunion, albeit slow, with my son, and little by little, with my grandson. We are not a perfect family, but we are possible. And that, for me, is a greater victory than any sentence. If this story touched your heart, if at some point you saw yourself in it, if at some point you felt that you were also silenced by a system, by a person, by a mistake, then comment now with the keyword Viva. And don't forget to subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to regain dignity. Because now, I know, I wasn't buried, I was silenced, but still, I came back. And as long as there is a voice, no one will kill me on paper anymore. I exist, I am, and I will continue, until the end. After the public hearing and the unexpected repercussion it generated, my routine changed completely. People I had never seen before started looking for me. Some came looking for help. Others just wanted to understand how someone could disappear from legal life without leaving a trace. And there were those who didn't believe in anything, who looked at me with suspicion, as if I had faked everything for attention or easy forgiveness. But I wasn't looking for approval. What I wanted was to recover the condition of existing in peace. And that peace was still far away. That same week, the prosecutor informed me that the main accused, the politician involved in the scheme, had appealed the court decision and requested habeas corpus. He alleged persecution and said that the entire accusation against him was based on the testimony of a woman with a criminal and emotionally unstable history. Seeing my name used in these terms once again made me feel that old tightness in my chest, the old feeling of always being one step away from being silenced again. But now I had something I never had before, public voice. And that, for those who were erased, is worth more than any political power. One night, I received a visit from the prosecutor at my house. She came without warning, with tired eyes and a serious expression. He told me that authorized wiretaps revealed that the accused, even under investigation, still maintained control over people who could interfere in the process. A name appeared in the audios. The name of the doctor who signed the false death certificate. The prosecutor looked me in the eye and said it was possible they would try to hit me again. Maybe not physically, but legally. They would try to discredit me, bring up every mistake from my past so that everything I said would be questioned. I asked what to do. She just replied that the only way now was to continue. Firm, truly, and protection. In the following days, I received a subpoena. The politician's lawyer had requested that I give a new statement, this time before a special commission. They wanted to expose me, review every detail of my story, search my entire life to find any contradiction. It was an old strategy. If they can't shut up, they try to wear it down. And I knew it wouldn't be easy. I arrived at the commission building accompanied by Louisa, the lawyer who never abandoned me. We entered a cold room with 2 white walls, aggressive lights, and recorders everywhere. Corners. There were 5 people sitting at the front. No women. All men in suits, with looks that pierced me before they even opened their mouths. They started with simple questions: name, address, occupation. But they soon changed their tone. One of them asked me why a woman like me, with a dirty history, would have enough credibility to accuse respected public figures. Another wanted to know how I managed to survive for 12 years without documents if I had received help from criminals. I answered everything firmly, without raising your voice, without justifying myself. I said I wasn't there to clean up my image, but to show the truth. Then came the cruelest question of all. One of them, his voice full of irony, asked if I thought I deserved what happened. If somehow my death on paper was not a logical consequence of the choices I made. The room fell silent. Even one of the men's pens stopped moving. I took a deep breath, and I replied that deserving is a dangerous word, that no one deserves to be erased, even if they made a mistake, that paying for your actions is different from disappearing, that being punished is fair, but being buried alive is a crime, and that if they were there to humiliate me, they would waste their time. Because those who have already been erased and come back don't break with questions. When I left that room, my breathing was still heavy, but in his chest there was a new kind of strength. It wasn't pride, no rematch. It was certainty. I had crossed the war zone of shame, and now I knew they could no longer hold me back. My son met me at the building gate. He had an envelope in his hands. It was a letter from my granddaughter, a 12-year-old girl. I had seen myself on television, with my mother, my daughter-in-law, and he wrote that he thought what I was doing was beautiful, that I didn't understand everything, but I knew I was trying to fix something, and that, if one day I wanted to tell her my story, she would listen carefully. Upon reading those words, the tears fell effortlessly, because there, in those childish lyrics, was confirmation that perhaps I had finally broken the cycle, that my granddaughter, even without knowing everything, saw me as someone who was trying, and that was enough. In the days that followed, the investigation advanced. The registry office employee was preventively arrested. The doctor had his license suspended, and the politician was called to testify. He denied everything. He said he never saw me, but the evidence said otherwise. The recordings, the documents, the bank records, everything lined up. And now, the case was gaining international repercussion. Journalists from outside the country began to contact the prosecutor's office. They wanted to understand how a system allowed someone to be legally killed and used as a pawn in a power game. It was then that I received an invitation. A talk show wanted me to tell my story live. It was a chance to give a voice not only to myself, but to all the women who disappeared without ever having the chance to return. I accepted. Scared, yes, but also with purpose. I walked into the studio with my hospital bracelet in my pocket. It was my symbol, my truth. And when the camera turned on, I took a deep breath, looked into the lens, and started talking. Not ashamed, but with dignity. Because that was my story, made of failures, yes, but also resistance. If you have followed this far, write the word honor in the comments, because that's what we're looking for when we decide to speak. And if this story touched any part of your life, share it. Send it to someone who is in the dark. Someone who needs to know that, even after a lifetime of being silenced, it is still possible to stand up and say, I am here. Today, I understand that justice is not just a sentence. It is the right to exist truthfully, and that no matter how much they try to erase who we are, there is always a point of light. And sometimes, all we need is the courage to light it. I lit mine, and I will never let them erase it again. The live interview was broadcast on national television, and, to my surprise, it also reached international channels. I was sitting in that studio with my eyes fixed on the camera, holding the hospital bracelet with my fingers intertwined, as if it were my anchor against everything that would still try to silence me. I spoke calmly, without rushing, like someone who finally has time to be heard after years of suffocating words. The presenter respected every silence, every pause, every verbal scar that I exposed to the country. When he finished, the messages started coming in non-stop. People of all ages saying they have also been silenced. Women who lost their names in abusive marriages. People who were declared dead by mistake, or worse, by convenience. And among all those messages, there was one in particular, one that would change everything. It belonged to a woman named Dolores, who lived in a remote village on the border. She said she was a nurse at a hospital where, 20 years ago, a patient was admitted under a forged identity. She remembered the name used on registration. It was my sister's name, but the face was not hers. She said she thought it was strange, but as she was ordered not to ask questions, she just recorded what they asked. When he saw my story, he connected the dots. The letter my sister left, the fake documents, and now this mysterious apparition with her name used by someone else. It was the missing piece. My sister had been replaced, or they used her name to hide someone, or she herself tried to come back with another identity, or it was used as bait to protect one of those involved. I contacted the prosecutor's office immediately. The prosecutor activated the network of investigators, and we gained access to the hospital's physical files. After days of sifting through boxes of moldy papers, poorly dated records, and illegible stamps, we found what we needed. A medical record with the date of admission, my sister's full name, and a photograph taken at the time of screening. The woman in the photo wasn't her. It was another, very similar, but it wasn't my sister. This proved that her name had been used by someone to forge another medical history. And the signature on the document? The same one that appeared on the fake papers on my death certificate. It was more than coincidence. It was standard. From that discovery onwards, everything began to unfold quickly. The prosecutor obtained judicial authorization to access restricted files from 3 different registry offices. In each of them, they found records of people presumed dead, but whose documents remained active for years. In common, they were linked to the same network of dispatchers, the same registry office, and the same clandestine clinic, and in all cases, a woman appeared at the center of the movements. That, Dolores, the former nurse. When confronted, she broke down. He said he spent years hiding what he knew out of fear, that she was threatened, who witnessed identity changes inside the hospital, that saw names disappear from the systems, and today, he recognized the error of having remained silent. She agreed to testify. With Dolores's testimony, we obtained another arrest warrant, this time from a former hospital director who also appeared linked to the accounts used to move money in my name. The web was almost completely assembled. All that was missing was the confession, the centerpiece, the politician. He continued to deny it, using all possible legal loopholes. But the pressure was increasing, and then, one Tuesday morning, we received an anonymous file via email, a video. Security camera, it dates from 2007. It showed a small room with low lighting. In it, the politician appeared alongside the registry office employee and another man who has not yet been identified. On the table, there were 4 folders with names. Among them, mine, clearly visible. And a sentence was said, captured by low-quality audio, but audible enough to shake everything. Let's kill this one in the system. Nobody will miss it. The important thing is that the number is clean. It was the test that sealed his fate. The prosecutor rushed with the request for immediate arrest. There was no more denying it. The identity fraud ring existed. It was real. And it had used my name as a guinea pig to cover up larger crimes. People had disappeared. Documents were falsified. Lives were rearranged for the benefit of a rotten elite who treated civil records like game chips. And now, for the first time, someone would pay. The news of the arrest was widely publicized. Headlines in newspapers, radio, and television news. The image of him being handcuffed went down in history, and my name, which had previously been associated with a dead woman, with a possible criminal, was now linked to courage, survival, and truth. For the first time, I felt that my voice had become mainstream, a current that pulled other voices with it. If you're here until now, write the current word in the comments, because that's who we are when we decide to speak. A current that carries memories, truths, pain, but also justice. Share this story with someone who needs to know that the truth can be buried, but never remain silent. In the following months, I was invited to participate in a working group on civilian disappearances. I met other erased women, each one with its own story, but all with the same silence. We had a conversation circle. One of them told me that, after hearing my case, she found the courage to file for document revalidation. Another managed to see her children again. And one, who had lived under a false name for 20 years, decided to give everything up and start over. I have seen, with my own eyes, the impact that truth can have when it comes loaded with clean intention. And more than that, I saw how resisting is not just surviving, it's existing with purpose. Today, I continue to live in the same small house, in the same modest neighborhood. But now, when I walk to the market or take the bus, people jerk me off, greet. They call me by name, my name, the one they tried to erase, the one I fought to get back. My son calls me every week. My granddaughter sends me messages with hand-drawn hearts. And when people ask me what changed, I always say the same thing. I chose to live, not like someone who runs away, but like someone who comes back. And if you are living in hiding, afraid of being who you are, know this. Your story only ends when you choose not to tell it. As long as there is truth within you, there is still time to rewrite the end. And may this end be worthy, even if the beginning was full of pain. I'm Helena. I was buried alive in the system, but I came back. And now, with every step I take, I leave a trail for others to follow. Justice did not give me back my lost years, but it gave me back something even more valuable, the right to be who I am, and that no one will take away from me. Never again. With the arrest ordered and the main names of the fraud publicly exposed, the tension that surrounded me changed tone. It was no longer the fear of being erased again. Now it was the weight of visibility. Living as a ghost had its pain, but being seen fully, with all the baggage I carried, required new strength. The face in the headlines, the voice in interviews, the eyes of strangers watching me in the market or at the bus stop. That woman who previously crossed the streets like a shadow was now called a symbol. And that, as fair as it seemed, was a burden. Because I wasn't a heroine, I was a consequence. The prosecutor informed me that the main trial, the one that would bring together everyone involved with formal evidence, witnesses, and expertise, was scheduled. The date arrived like a dull thump in the chest. I knew that would be the end point, or the dividing line between what I was and what I would become. That would be the last time my story would be told in a courtroom. And for the first time, I would have the right to look into the eyes of whoever killed me on paper and say everything. The day before the hearing, I slept little. I spent hours reading the documents again, rereading my sister's letter, looking at every line of the forged death certificate. I left the hospital bracelet on the kitchen table next to a lit candle, not for religion, but as a gesture of honor for everything that was experienced and for everything that almost ended. In the early hours of the morning, I wrote a letter to my granddaughter, a letter to be read in the future. He said that the truth does not always arrive in time to save us, but that it always arrives in time to free us. The day dawned with a clear sky. I wore the simplest clothes I had, a light blouse, old pants, and worn shoes. I wanted to enter that court with the same dignity that I learned to sew, day after day, with pieces of my shame and courage. Upon arrival, the building was surrounded by the press, police, and protesters. The case had taken on a scale that not even the prosecution anticipated. I climbed the stairs like someone walking over the most painful memories. Each step carried a part of the woman I was, the one they took from me and the one I became. Inside, everyone was there, the defendants, the lawyers, the judge, the public, the press. A structure set up to judge, listen, confront. I was called to the front as the main witness, and in front of everyone, they asked me to retell my story. Not just the facts, but the effects, the losses, the pains, the absence, the time. And I spoke. I spoke like someone who bleeds and breathes at the same time. I told you what it was like to disappear with the name still hot, what it's like to live with expired documents and expired identity, what it's like to try to be a mother without being recognized, what it is to love with fear, working in the dark, become invisible even when shouting. The judge asked for silence in the room after I finished, and then he called the accused to testify, one by one. The clerk at the registry office tried to deny it, but cross-records contradicted him. The doctor remained silent, supported by a habeas corpus that gave him the right not to respond. And the politician, the same one who once smiled when he signed my order, tried to claim that he was acting on orders from above, that he was just a piece in the system. But the prosecutor confronted him with the videos, with the bank records, with the recording in which he said I was disposable. At that moment, the judge interrupted. He asked for the audio to be played in the room. Everyone heard. The sentence echoed through the courtroom walls like a collective punch. Let's kill this one in the system. Nobody will miss it. The room fell silent, and it was then that the judge looked at me and asked if I would like to say something final. I got up. I walked to the center of the room, and in a low but firm voice, I responded. I didn't die. Not by chance, not by miracle. I didn't die because there was still a story in me that needed to be told. And today, looking at who erased me, I say that living is my act of justice, that continuing is my revenge, that existing is my answer. They tried to take me out of my life for paper. I chose to return for the truth. The judge then read the sentence. The registry office employee, convicted. The doctor, away and responding freely with restrictions. The politician, convicted in 2 instances. The fraud was recognized. My death certificate, officially annulled. And my name, recognized as a victim of the system that was supposed to protect me. There was applause, but not for me, for the voices that joined mine, for the women who were in the courtroom, stands holding signs with their dates of birth and lack of documents, for those who are still fighting to prove that they exist. When I left the courtroom, the air in my lungs felt in a new way. I took a deep breath. I walked without looking around. I knew I had won something bigger than the process. He had overcome invisibility, and, although there are still open wounds, they are now breathing. They no longer rot in silence. If you've heard everything so far, comment on the word dignity, because that's what we recover when we decide to face what erased us. And share this story with someone who believes it's too late to start over. Because, as I discovered, it never is. It's never too late to step out of the shadows and say, I'm here. Today, my name has weight again. Not the weight of shame, but the weight of presence. And every time I sign a paper, receive a letter with my name, hear someone call me Helena, I feel that the world has finally recognized that I never ceased to exist. I just needed to relearn how to see myself. And now that I'm back, I won't leave the place that was always mine, because being alive is my right. And I won him over, word for word, step by step, silence for silence, scream for scream. With the sentence passed, and my name finally cleared before justice and society, the world seemed to stop for a few seconds. It was as if time respected the weight of what had just happened. I left the court with my body exhausted, but my spirit upright. It wasn't euphoria, it was something else. A silent peace that flowed slowly through the pores like a breeze after a storm that lasted decades. I no longer needed to explain who I was. I no longer needed to prove that I deserved to exist. For the first time, reality bent the truth, and not the other way around. In the days that followed, the city saw me with new eyes. People who previously crossed the street without noticing me now looked into my eyes. Some waved, others just smiled from afar. In front of the market, a lady told me that she had watched everything on television and that she felt represented. On the bus, a young woman handed me a folded note saying that my story had inspired her to look for the mother she hadn't seen in 15 years. And a child, perhaps no more than 8 years old, pointed at me and told his grandmother that I was the woman who came back from the dead. I smiled, because it was true. Coming back from the dead has a price. And I knew there would still be difficult days. There would still be suspicions. There would still be those who looked at me and only saw my past. But now that no longer breaks me, because I also looked at myself, and he saw. I saw the woman I was, the one they allowed me to be, the one they forced me to become, and most importantly, the one I chose to be after everything. I set up, with the help of the prosecutor and the lawyer, a small support group for women who live on the margins of documentation. Those who never managed to register their children, who lost their names in legal proceedings, who live with borrowed surnames. Women who, like me, survived longer in silence than in words. Every week, we sit in a circle. We exchange stories, tears, truths. Many don't know where to start, and I always say the same thing. Start by listening to yourself. Before you say who you are, allow yourself to remember who you were. Because healing doesn't start with screaming. It starts with recognition. My granddaughter visited me days after the sentence. He brought colorful drawings with phrases written in crooked letters. One had a red heart with the words, "Grandma is alive." That tore me apart inside, not for affection, but because for the first time, someone from my lineage was writing about me truthfully, not as a souvenir, not as absence, but as a living presence. She asked me if one day I would tell her the whole story, and I said yes, that I would count on all the mistakes, all the shames, all the wrong decisions, all the attempts, because she had the right to know. Because when you hide the past, you condemn the future to the same cycle. Over time, my son got closer again. There are still silences between us. Some pain cannot be explained. Others don't forgive themselves. But there is respect. There is exchange. There is coexistence. And that, for me, is already an everyday miracle. He looks at me as someone who is still looking for the mother he lost as a child, but also as someone who is beginning to see the woman who came back to recover what was left. And sometimes, when we say goodbye, he holds my hand for a second too long, and that second is worth more than all the words we haven't been able to say yet. I continued to live in the same house, simple, small, silent, but now full of small gestures. Plants in the window, pictures of my sister on the wall, an old radio playing songs that talk about new beginnings, a new notebook where I write everything that has been stored for decades, not to publish, but to leave, so that one day if someone wants to understand what it's like to come back from social death, they will find a path already taken. I receive invitations to lectures, events, conversation circles. Sometimes I accept, sometimes not, because I learned that my story is not a spectacle. She is a tool, and like every tool, it needs to be used with purpose, not for applause, but to open doors, to cut the bonds of silence, to build bridges between those who are still afraid to speak and those who have already decided to free themselves. If you've followed everything so far, write the word "fresh start" in the comments, because that's what this story represents, the chance to start over even when everything seems over, even when the world decides you no longer exist. And if this story touched any part of your truth, share it. Don't keep it to yourself. Someone may right now be believing that there is no way out, and maybe this story is the missing spark. Little by little, I learned to live again. I started reconnecting with simple pleasures, drink coffee without rushing, walking in the late afternoon feeling the wind, listening to the sound of rain without fear of someone taking me away. Because for years, any noise was a sign of threat. Now every noise is a sign of life, presence, back. I went back to studying. I signed up for an evening digital literacy course. I want to learn how to use platforms, communicate with other women, spread information. Because I understood that deletion also occurs due to lack of access. And I don't want to live on the margins of anything anymore. Not from the system, not from knowledge, not from myself. And even with everything that has happened, I know that there is no way to erase the marks. Some nights I still wake up scared. Some names still make me feel nauseous. Some memories still burn as if they were from yesterday. But now I know how to deal with it. Because now, every scar is also a page turned. Every old pain is the cement that supports my present. My name returned to circulation among records, archives, and stories. Not as a statistic, but as resistance. Helena is now synonymous with courage on some wheels. In others, it is still just a woman who dared to return, and that's enough. Because living truthfully does not require applause. It requires awareness. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see the woman I was, that I survived being, and that I now choose to continue being. Not perfect, not exempt, but whole. And this wholeness is what moves me. Because in the end, the only thing that really matters is being able to say, with both feet on the ground, that we are here, that we resist, we're back, and that no one will silence us anymore. If you know someone who has been erased, silenced, or judged for what they were, share this story. Show that it is possible to return, that it is possible to start over, that it is possible to live again. Because as long as there is truth, there is a way. And I'm walking mine, step by step, with my head held high, my name clear, and my heart finally at peace. Today marks exactly 1 year since my name officially came back into existence. Since the death certificate was annulled, since justice recognized that I was erased by a system and by people who thought they were above the truth. And I decided to wait for this day in silence, in reflection, not to celebrate with a party, nor to seek tribute, but to honor time. Because time, when lived truthfully, transforms. And what was once pain, with courage, can become wisdom. I look around me and see a simple life, a modest house, but full of presence, a balcony with flowers that I planted myself, a shelf with donated books, a radio that plays softly while I write these words, and on the kitchen table, that same hospital bracelet, now inside a glass frame, not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of survival. I leave it there, visible, as proof that the system can try to bury you, but if you choose to return, no one is able to stop you. My routine today is calm. I wake up early, prepare my coffee, feed my cats, open the windows, and let the light in. I'm part of a project that helps invisible women recover their documents, their voices, and their courage. Every week, I receive someone new, someone who has been forgotten, ignored, silenced. They arrive with fear in their eyes, with their shoulders slumped, with their stories broken, and they leave with their heads held a little higher, not always with everything resolved, but with a spark lit, and that spark is worth more than any speech. I learned, in the last year, that freedom does not come only with a court sentence. True freedom comes when you recognize yourself, even with all your flaws, and choose to love yourself anyway. When you understand that the past cannot be remade, but it can be understood, that mistakes don't need to be shameful if they are transformed into paths, and that asking for forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of greatness. And I asked for forgiveness from myself, from my son, from my granddaughter, from my sister who disappeared, from the other women who crossed my path without me being able to reach out. I received pardons, others don't, and that is also part of it. Because no one has the obligation to forgive you. What you can do is not repeat it. It's not hiding anymore. It's doing it differently. Dignity is born when you look in the mirror and know you are trying. That, even if you stumble, you are going. That, even though you are afraid, you are telling the truth. And that, in itself, is justice. Along this journey, I discovered that I am not alone, that there are thousands of women like me, women with difficult pasts, with marks that have not healed, with stories that have been stolen, manipulated, or erased, but also women hungry for a fresh start, thirsty for respect, with the courage to do something different, even after a lifetime of being treated as disposable. And it is to them that I dedicate everything I have achieved, every line of this script, every piece of evidence I handed in, every word I was afraid to say, but I said. Today, I want to leave one last message for you who have accompanied me here. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you made. Not even how many times they said you didn't deserve to be heard. If there is still truth within you, there is still time. There is still a way out. There is still a way. Because dignity does not depend on what others think. It is born when you stop running away from yourself. When you decide, even if late, to do what is right. And if this story touched your heart, if at some point you saw yourself in it, leave the word legacy in the comments. Because that's what this story has become. A legacy. A testimony that it is never too late to start over. It's never too late to get up. It's never too late to recover what was stolen from you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share. Send this video to a friend, a mother, a neighbor, someone who has been feeling too invisible for too long. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel. Here, we tell stories that disturb, that move, that inspire. Stories that show that time can be hard, but that it can also heal. And turn on notifications to keep receiving stories like this, which are not fiction. These are real lives, full of pain, but also of hope. Today, at 64 years old, I can say clearly that I have never felt so alive. Not even when I was young. Not even when he tried to look strong. Because now I am. Not because I'm perfect, but because I'm true. And being true, after everything I've experienced, is my greatest act of love towards myself. I thank each person who listened to me without judging me. To every woman who stood up with me. To each professional who believed in my story, even when the system said I didn't exist. With each silence that became a word. With every tear that turned into courage. With each door that opened. And above all, I thank life for giving me another chance. A chance to exist with dignity. To teach, to rebuild, to leave a clean trail. I'm Helena. And now, with my whole body, with my name clean, and with a light heart, I can say, I was erased, but I was not defeated. I was forgotten, but I didn't give up. And if I can come back, so can you. It doesn't matter what they told you. It doesn't matter who made you believe that your time is up. As long as there is a breath inside you, there is still room for a new page. Let my story serve as proof. And that, wherever someone is living on the margins of silence, may this message arrive as a hug, as a beacon, as a warning. You can still do it. You still deserve it. You still are. It's never too late to regain your dignity. Never.